Once upon a time, people were told that Hansel and Gretel was only a fairy tale, a harmless story about two lost children, a candy house, and a wicked witch. But the truth is far darker than anyone was meant to know. Beneath its sweet surface lies a story built on hunger, witchcraft, and blood. The origins of Hansel and Gretel lead us to a time of unimaginable suffering. The year was 1314, and Europe was collapsing under the weight of the Great Famine. For 7 endless years, the skies poured rain. The crops rotted in the fields, and entire villages starved. People ate grass, roots, and the bark of trees. Some turned to eating their dead. Priests wrote about the smell of cooked flesh drifting from peasant homes. There were stories of mothers who ate their own children to survive. That is the world that gave birth to the legend of Hansel and Gretel. Imagine a poor woodcutter with no food to give his family, his wife whispering that they could live longer if they abandoned their children in the forest. It wasn't fantasy. It was survival. In those days, parents leaving their children to die wasn't cruelty. It was mercy. The forest was both a refuge and a grave. The trail of breadcrumbs in the story wasn't just clever. It was a symbol of hope. Tiny traces of humanity scattered in a world that had forgotten mercy. Deep in those forests lived people the church called heretics. Women who healed with herbs, midwives, and those who still practiced rituals older than Christianity itself. To the church, they were witches. To the starving, they were demons. Stories spread about women who lived in isolation, who lured travelers into their homes with warmth and food, and who were never seen again. Some said they cooked children and preserved their flesh for the winter. Others believed they ate the young to keep their youth. The famous house of candy was never meant to be sweet. It was a disguise, a trap, a home built to look welcoming to the hungry but hiding horror inside. The sugar and candy were symbols of temptation, the things that lure desperate souls when the world offers nothing else. Centuries later, archaeologists, studying the lands, that inspired the Grimm brothers found something horrifying. In the forests, near ruined medieval villages, they unearthed bones, small bones blackened by fire, many belonging to children. Some were carved with strange runes. Near one site, a clay oven stood buried in the ground filled with ash and fragments of teeth. To those who studied them, the stories of witches and ovens no longer seemed like fantasy. They were fragments of memory, too dark to erase. The Grimm brothers collected folk tales from peasants and travelers. In their earliest versions of Hansel and Gretel, before the stories were censored for children, the ending was not happy. In some, Gretel never escaped. In others, Hansel was forced to eat the flesh of other children, believing it was bread. When he learned the truth, he went insane. The witch was not just a monster. She was part of a ritual, a cult that believed consuming the flesh of the young could bring fertility, power, or life beyond death. The witch's oven was not a symbol. It was real, and to the people of the Middle Ages, it was not a metaphor. They had seen human-sized ovens. They had smelled what burned inside. The oven represented both death and rebirth. Fire was believed to purify the body and release the spirit. Witchcraft twisted that belief, turning salvation into sacrifice. When the famine finally ended, the church began its witch hunts. But what it was really hunting were the memories of those years of hunger. The shame, the fear, the things people did to survive. The Inquisition burned the witches and the stories they carried. But Hansel and Gretel survived because it was rewritten. It became a warning for children. Obey your parents. Don't wander off. Beware of strangers. Yet behind that moral, the real story still whispered. It reminded people of a time when hunger made monsters of men, when mothers abandoned daughters, and when witches prayed for rain while feeding on the dead. Even now, in the villages near Kassel and the Black Forest, people whisper of strange lights between the trees, fires that appear in the night where no one lives, voices calling your name when no one is there. Some say the witch was not human, that she was hunger itself, born from the famine, returning whenever the land grows weak. Every century, when the world begins to starve again, she returns, waiting for lost children in the dark. Some hikers have found strange carvings on the trees, the same symbols discovered near the old ovens. Others swear they smelled burning sugar drifting through the forest when there was nothing there to burn. Maybe the witch is only a story, or maybe the story is what's left of something real. Hansel and Gretel, as told to children, is a story of cleverness and courage. But the true tale is about hunger, about the loss of humanity. It shows what happens when survival becomes more important than love, when starvation turns people into something else. The real monsters were never witches. They were people, driven mad by fear and famine. Fairy tales were never meant to comfort us. They were born from pain. They were warnings. Each story that begins with once upon a time hides a grave behind it. Hansel and Gretel were not just children in a story. They were symbols of the innocent who vanished in a time when death was everywhere. So when you think of the gingerbread house, don't imagine sugar and candy. Imagine smoke, bones buried beneath the roots of trees, a whisper in the dark promising warmth. And when you hear that whisper, remember what the story truly means. Once upon a time, 2 children entered the forest. They never came back. What returned was only a story, a warning, a memory of what hunger can do. Hansel and Gretel is not a fairy tale. It is the confession of a world that tried to forget what it became when the hunger came. Once upon a time, they told us it was only a story, but maybe it was history all along.